Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. So in this video we are comparing the Zcam F6 against the Panasonic S1. Both cameras are sharing the exact same sensor manufactured by Sony. So the question comes into my mind, same sensor, same image quality? Well, let's gonna find out. Hi guys, my name is Paul, I'm a German filmmaker and this channel is all about filmmaking, gear reviews but also DaVinci Resolve tutorials. So if that's something that you're interested in, consider subscribe, I would really appreciate that. So this comparison makes even more sense since the S1 just got an update allowing the camera to also record in 6K, and this camera also has Vlog installed. So I figured, hey, maybe a great idea to compare these cameras because they share the exact same sensor, and how is the image quality, dynamic range, colors, frame rates and so many more. Also many thanks to Nirgend Media, they helped me shooting this because they are owning the S1 alongside the Panasonic VariCam. So therefore, without them that wouldn't have been possible, and thanks Finn for helping me on this one. But before we're gonna start, I just wanted to answer a question because many of you ask me where I find my music that I use for my professional work, but also here on YouTube. So I mainly use Artlist, Epidemic Sound and also Audio, and I'm very happy to announce that Audio just launched Audio Pro, which has no restriction when it comes to the license. So you can also use the music for everything. So for $200 a year, I think this is a great deal, and it gets even better because I have a 20% bonus coupon code for you. Just check the link in the description. But now let's start by talking about handling and design. So obviously the S1 is like a photo camera and also has this body, but it is really well built. So mostly no plastic materials, it's really high quality built and it feels really rock solid. The F6 on the other hand is built like a cube-shaped cinema camera and is also built like a tank. So from the materials that they use, both cameras feel really premium in the hand, and yeah, you don't need to worry about that the camera gets broken or anything because the cameras are really built rock solid. The F6 does record on CFast cards, whereas the S1 records on XQD cards. So I personally prefer CFast because they are much more fine than other cameras as well. And for the mount, the Zcam has an interchangeable lens mount. It comes per default with a locking EF mount, and the S1 comes with the L mount, which is, there are not many lenses out there, so you will find yourself adapting to use other lenses. So I think you have much better option here on the Zcam because also the lens mount is user interchangeable very quickly. And lastly, as many mirrorless cameras, the S1 features a flippable screen, which is really great if you don't want to use an external monitor. And the Zcam has like a really tiny little screen, which is not useful at all if you want to use it to view your footage. But as I've said, you can use like the app to control your phone, so that's really great. But I also highly recommend you to use an external monitor in this camera. A very important aspect when it comes to filmmaking is the codec, of course. So the F6 records internally in RAW, which is ZRAW, and also can record externally ProRes RAW, but also features ProRes internally, ProRes 422 in various different flavors in every resolution that the camera offers, and also has H.265, which is also 10-bit. But 420, and also has H.264, so you have various different codecs here to choose from. I mostly use ProRes, and I think that's great to have that on the camera. The S1 on the other hand can't record internally in RAW. You can record externally ProRes RAW, but not internally. and you have like normal codecs, either MOV or MP4 or something like that. You have 10-bit as well, 10-bit 422, but only up to 4K. If you go above 4K, then you only have 10-bit 420. So yeah, that's really better here on the Z-Cam. So now let's talk about frame rates. So I was really interested what each manufacturer got out of these cameras with the same sensor. So in 6K, the Z-Cam can record up to 48 frames per second, whereas the S1 can record up to 30 frames per second. So you can also use in the highest resolution possible also slow motion, which is really great. If we go down to 4K, the Z-Cam can record in full frame up to 48 frames per second. If you go up to, let's say, 90 frames, which you can, then the camera has a slight crop of 1.2 or 1.3x. It should be something in between, so it's, I think, fairly acceptable. And you can also go up to 4K 120 frames per second, but that only in CinemaScope mode, and that's a 1.4x crop. But the camera really gives you great options here. The S1 on the other hand has a really big crop above 30 frames per second in 4K, so the 60 FPS, 50 FPS, 60 FPS looks like it's a 1.5x crop, something like that. You see it now here in comparison. So that's better on the Z-Cam if you compare like crop factors when you want to shoot in higher frame rates. And there's also no option to record 4K 120 on the S1. And if we drop down to 2K, the Z-Cam can record in 2K 120 FPS full frame in ProRes, but it also can record in 170 frames per second in 2K, but that's a Super 16 crop. Interestingly, the S1 can record in full frame 2K up to 150 frames per second and can record in 180 frames per second, which is also cropped. If we compare these images side by side, I much prefer the slow motion on the Z-Cam, because the 120p in 2K and also 170 frames looks cleaner, looks less noisier with less artifacts, something like that. And also you have 10-bit 422, what I've said, so also the codec is much more beefier. So therefore, when it comes to super slow motion, I would pick the Z-Cam, and also when it comes to frame rates in general, because this camera also gives you the option to change the frame rate in very fine increments, so 1 frame, 2 frames, whatsoever. Whereas on the S1 you have more like the traditional frames like 24, 25, 30, 50, 60, something like that. And as I've already talked about the noisy images, that leads me to low light. So there I was really interested in the same sensor. I have no noise reduction applied on the Z-Cam, but the Z-Cam looks much cleaner in high ISO. As you may have seen from my other test or in my Z-Cam review, you can use the camera up to 25,600 ISO, which is crazy. Really clean image. On the S1 I think you can use it up to 6400. Above you can also use it up to 12,800, but then I would really suggest to run some noise reduction on the footage. But here the Z-Cam is really clean, and I think you can even get better results if you turn on internal noise reduction. So really great that what the Z-Cam can do. So that's like 2 stops better in low light. So now let's talk about dynamic range, which camera is better than the other. So from my test, I think we've only shot a couple hours outside, so not the in-depth test which I do normally, but from what I've seen, both cameras are really on one level. I would say I wouldn't really say that one camera is better than the other. What I've seen is that the S1 has brighter shadows, and I think that's also due to how Z-Log is distributing the dynamic range. It's more into the highlights than into the shadows, so therefore I think you have maybe an edge in the highlights opposed to the S1. But I think in general, from what I've seen and from what I feel, both cameras have the same dynamic range. So now let's finally come to image quality and also color. And in the blind test, camera A was the Zcam E2 F6 and camera B was the S1. I also ask you as always on Instagram, and they are really close results, so I think we can fairly say that both cameras are really close when it comes to colors. In most situations in some situations I couldn't really figure out which one is which when I was looking at the image, so I just applied to the log image. Here I used the Z-Log color plugin from Zcam, and on a Panasonic I used V-Log to Rec 709 LUT from Panasonic. So, and I think the images are turning out really great. The Zcam always looks a little bit warmer. I just adjusted the white balance always according to the color chart. So the Zcam looks in mostly the shots a little bit warmer, whereas the S1 looks a little bit cooler. But also I prefer slightly how the Zcam handles like the highlight tones and also like the skin tones a little bit more. So therefore I prefer personally the Zcam, but these cameras are really close. And what I really like about the S1 is because it's a hybrid camera, you know, like also stills camera. And if you compare that to like the Sonys and the Canons, these cameras always look like really digitally over sharpened and have this video-ish look. So therefore I really like that the S1 looks really organic, not over sharpened, something like that, really filmic. So therefore I think the S1 is in this hybrid style camera one of the best cameras to use for filming or filmmaking, because it has a very filmic image, which I really like. So now let's come to the conclusion, which camera should you buy? So that's something that only you can answer, because that depends on your needs. So if you're a hybrid shooter and you do photo as well as you do video, then obviously get the S1, because you can do great images also with that, and also can filming with that. But if you're more like into cinema and you want to have a proper cinema camera, then obviously get the F6. It has more options when it comes to frame rates, recording options, codecs, something like that, and it is a proper cinema camera, as I've said. The disadvantage that I see on the S1 is, for me personally, the mount. It features the L mount, and therefore not many lenses are out there. And if you're going out on a shoot, and if you're working with some other people's on a set, you want to change lenses, so the EF mount is mostly likely the standard. But also here, or PL, whatever, here you can easily swap the mount out, which is very helpful. So therefore I think you have much more options in terms of lenses and overall creative vision, so to say, on the Zcam. But that's always like the trade-off if you use like a hybrid camera. Most cameras don't offer this feature that you can swap out the mount, that's for sure. But it is what it is. And now to the question, same sensor, same image quality, not quite as that. So I prefer the Zcam because I think it looks a little bit more filmic, but as I've said, the S1 isn't bad at all, and both cameras share a lot of similarities and they can very easily matched. So therefore I think if you want to use both, these ones are great cameras. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did so, please hit that like, subscribe button, and if you have any further questions, just drop them down in the comments below, and I'm gonna see you in my very next video. Cheers!